Wild story, right? Well, joining me now for our Ask the Lawyer segment is New Haven attorney Tara Knight. She's here to talk about your rights as a homeowner, a landlord, even a renter. So thanks so much for being here with us tonight.
Thanks again for having me.
That is a bizarre story we just talked about a regular family goes on vacation. Other people are in their homes. They thought they had a legitimate lease from Craigslist, but you have to be really careful when you're signing a list. How do you go about knowing who's the real deal?
Well, you can do background checks if you're a landlord. You can do a credit check. In terms of if you are the landlord checking out the tenant, there is fraud. There really isn't much you can do about people who are acting in a criminal way. So I guess maybe just do some background checking into the landlord's background and whether or not they've been doing this for a while.
Right. Well, let's talk about you have a legal contract.
Yes.
So you're in your place, you have a landlord, but things are going wrong. Your shower is broken, the water's busting, things are leaking, paint peeling. How do you go about when you're a landlord, they're responsible, but they're not doing the work that you know desperately needs to be done? What do you do?
There are some things a landlord must do. They must present the tenant with a clean apartment, clean common areas, proper lighting. They must adhere to fire codes and environmental codes and housing codes. But if there are extraordinary things like rodents or peeling paint, you have to first, common sense, ask your landlord to fix it. If your landlord doesn't fix it, I would do it in writing, keep a copy of the letter. After that, if there's still no give, I would call the code enforcement officer in your town. And each town has a housing court, and go to the housing court. The clerks and the personnel there are very helpful, and they can hook you up in that respect and tell you what to do, because you can ultimately bring a lawsuit against a landlord if they fail to comply with these codes.
All right. Know who to go to is key.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about a natural disaster, because often when you rent, they say be sure to get renter's insurance. But let's say in the case of a natural disaster, you didn't get renter's insurance, you're new in there, all of a sudden you have floodwaters in your apartment. Who's going to pay for that? The landlord? Are they responsible at all?
Well, they are in some respects, because you do not have to pay rent if the apartment is not habitable. If you're not able to live there, you can't, you're not necessarily obliged to pay rent. But in terms of the contents of your apartment, that's something a landlord has no responsibility for. So if you've got heirlooms or furniture or other valuables, you need to take out renter's insurance. And so many renters and tenants don't do that, and it's so important to do that.
And it's often not too expensive, so
Exactly.
it's okay. Let's say worst case scenario, you lose your job, you fall back on payments. Now an eviction notice signs up. How much time do you have in that situation? Can you fight it if your landlord is demanding that you get out? What are your rights if you're the renter?
Well, you have to, you're obligated to follow what the dictates of a binding contract are. So I just can't say you don't have to pay the rent. However, there is a process which landlords must go through in order to evict a tenant, and they have to serve documents on a tenant. I won't get into all of the particulars because it's kind of long-winded, but essentially you have to serve a notice to quit, which is a notice to the tenants that they have to vacate the premises, and it gives the tenants a certain amount of time. The tenants can contest that in housing court, and often the judges are sympathetic, especially in Connecticut, to the plight of tenants, and will give them what's called a stay of execution, which will give them some breathing room to get out of the apartment, as long as the tenant is making some payments toward the rent.
Right, that they're trying to be responsible. Maybe they're just in a hard way.
Right. I mean, they're not completely off the hook, but it's not. It's not cut and dry. It's not as if you don't pay the rent, the landlord can go in there and just kick you out. That's not how it goes.
Good to know. Tara Knight, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Good to see you as always.